Welcome to the GAIA Journey, everyone. It's a absolute warm welcome for those of you who have been with us before, and for those of you who may just be joining. Many of us are already putting our location in the chat. My name is Antoinette. I don't know if I said that already, and I'm standing in Cortland Manor, New York, and Lenape territory. And it's wonderful to be with everyone from all of these incredible places around the world. As many of you know, we are linking multiple Zoom rooms so that we can have a large group conversation and also go into the magic of small groups connecting with each other. And what I see here in this chat is from the Netherlands, Chicago, Austria, South Germany, California. I think it's getting to the time that we start to get the West Coast in. France, Boca Raton, Florida, Belgium, wonderful, Russia, Switzerland, amazing. So it's just wonderful to be gathering together in this way to connect with one another and to really go deeply into a global sense-making experience. GAIA stands for the global activation of intention and action. And what we are launching in 2021 is built on what we have prototyped for years before with the Presencing Institute, but it's also building on what came to pass in early 2020 when we felt the effects of a global pandemic. And for me, standing here in New York, in one of the epicenters of the pandemic, I had my own personal experience of the GAIA journey, which in many ways was holding it, but also in my own reflection on what was shared by community members. And one of the participants shared, "This is the moment that we were born for." And for me, in thinking about how that applies in our context, you know, we have this global sense-making experience, but then we apply it to our own place and space. For me, that meant turning to the work that I do with the Eileen Fisher Foundation and thinking through, okay, how can I actually apply this moment that I was born for into caring about my community? Because the other option for me was sitting in depression, sadness, fear of what the possibilities were of the disruption of our society and our the fabric of our communities. So what we turn towards is possibility, and that's possibility thinking. It's possibilities of how we can support our communities in a variety of different ways. There are many, many ways that we've been able to do that. And I've been so inspired by the stories that have been shared, the intentions that have been created, and what's really been activated in the community. So I will share more about all the different ways that we're doing that. There are these connections in our live sessions, and we have wonderful guests joining us today. And for now, I'll turn it over to Otto to guide us into the current moment.
Thank you, Antoinette, and also a warm welcome from my end here in Boston, Massachusetts. This is the moment we have been born for. That's a feeling that I also share, and it has an individual dimension, but it also has a collective dimension. A collective dimension that has to do with a felt sense that many of us have that one old system is collapsing and dying while another one is wanting to be born and is beginning to be born, in fact. And with system, we mean ways of organizing the economy, organizing society, organizing learning systems in a way that is aligned with our intentions, with a healthy planet and with well-being in our communities. And when we pause a little bit and look at 2020 and this moment, I think we all feel that if 2020 really was the year of disruption, that most of us feel that this is the beginning of something. It's not the end of something. So more disruptions are coming our way. And it's not going to be easy. But what's going to happen in the next decade is of an absolutely critical importance for the future, not only of our communities, but also the future of evolution here on this planet. And what this sentence, Antoinette, this is the moment we have been born for. What it means for me is to just, yes, it's not going to be easy, but we can be awake, we can be connected, we can rise to the occasion, we can be fully present with what's happening and bring in our own agency. And that's really where the GAIA journey comes in, because most people feel something different is needed and I want to be part of that, but I don't know how. And that's when we envisioned in our core team, what might the 2021 journey look like? That's kind of where this visioning really started. And we really envisioned the GAIA journey forward as a journey that is helping us to catalyze not only our awareness, but also our agency around this other story. So if you want, it's like a mini MBA or like prototyping micromasters in transformation literacy, in rising to the occasion when we are in the midst of transformation. So here is a little bit the core idea, which has to do with the duality of systems and self. As you all know, in the better part of the 20th century was really defined by the Cold War system, which was a global system between two social economic systems, capitalism and socialism. But as we move into the 21st century, and when you really understand the deeper signature of 2020 and kind of the nature of the disruption in 2020, it was not a wall between systems that collapsed in 2020, but a wall between self and systems. And that's really at the heart of the GAIA journey. So understanding how the change outside requires change inside. And in fact, kind of that those two sides are not separate things. They're two different aspects of the same deeper process. And that as we go through the current period of transformation, we need to take different, we are seeing the new already happening in a number of different acupuncture points, which include finance, kind of rethinking finance from extractive to just money, which is the focus today. Social presencing theater, from systems thinking to systems sensing, which means kind of evolving systems thinking from a disembodied way to an embodied way of doing it. Soil and food, from factory farms to regenerative agriculture, from democracy, from minority rule and dependency to more direct, distributed and dialogic ways of governance. And then technology, from surveillance society to co-creativity and freedom. So that's the first part of that journey, which leads us to the heart of the journey that now Antoinette will be talking about, and then the second part in the later stages of the year.
Thanks, Otto. Yes. So just focusing at the bottom there, of this space between the duality of system and self, will land at the Global Forum, which many of you may have experienced this past year or in prior years. But it's a place where we'll come together and really do more of this global sense making across all of these acupuncture points and the places and spaces and contexts that we may be coming from. So please hold your calendar for June 15th to 17th, and we'd love to take any of your input as we co-create and plan that as we go forward. And then just looking at what we'll be focusing on coming out of that. And part of, being in the bottom of the U, we'll start to sense into this throughout all of the sessions, but really in the global forum as well, and moving into the session afterwards, the healing collective trauma. So really looking at shadow as a source for transformation. A part of the Gaia Journey from 2020, we'll sense deeper into that and crystallize our intention from that place. We'll move into economic transformation, looking at pathways to well-being for all in our economy. Well-being cities, looking at the SDGs within planetary boundaries, knowing that we have one planet. Looking at business and leadership through mission-driven enterprises, and looking at learning and education by democratizing transformation literacy. So that's really what we're beginning to prototype here together and in the SDGs Sustainable Development Goals. So as we look at this process together, you can really, as we prototype this, you can take it as far as you would like to go, and you can join us. And we referred to it as an inhale and exhale session. So in the inhale, you can join us together for this, these acupuncture points, these points on the map, but also these leverage areas that we can look at in our society. And we'll do those once per month. But we'll also have language tracks, and the language tracks and regions are meeting and discussing in their own context. So there's February 11th, Spanish and German, February 10th, Portuguese and French on February 15th. And we'll be continuing with those sessions and regions. There have been 7 of those going, and so those other dates will get announced soon if you haven't been part of them already. You'll also be able to join the conversation if you go to GaiaJourney.org, and I'll talk through more about how we do that together towards the end of the session. And we'll share micro practices that you can take on as much or as little as you wish of, and give us feedback on the prototype. So we look forward to moving through this journey and exploration together. Back over to you, Otto.
So the invitation really is here to engage in a journey where, if you choose to do so, you can engage with one of these acupuncture points in each month, and you will have a little bit of framing, a real life story, kind of a living example, and then ways to reflect on that in the context of your own personal experience. And then we'll end with a micro practice that allows you to realign your attention and intention more in respect to that particular acupuncture point. So that's the idea of the Gaia Journey. And then you can share your experience with others, kind of, and learn from what's emerging from that. So that's a little bit the invitation. And now we turn to the first acupuncture point, which is finance. And here with us as a co-host of the session and also as a speaker is Katrin Käufer, the author of Just Money, a book that just came out yesterday. Just Money, Mission-Driven Banks and the Future of Finance, 2021, MIT Press. Katrin, you have been, as the co-founder of the Presencing Institute and as the director of Just Money at the MIT Community Innovators Lab, you have been working with banks that use 100% kind of their attention to use of their capital to use finance as a tool for making the world a better place. So why does that matter for you? And kind of why is that, what brought you into this work in the beginning?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and welcome also from my end to everybody here in the space. It's wonderful to see all your faces. I realized at one point that, and I think I come into this like a lot of you, with this urge or with this question, how can we address the societal changes that we are facing as society, and how, what is needed to transform the way we live, to address challenges of inequality, to address the climate crisis. And I realized that we will not be able to do this without the financial sector. And in this earlier slide, you showed the relationship between system and me. And then I realized, my God, the financial system is so overwhelming. It's almost as democracies, we are no longer capable of really govern this system. So how can someone as a researcher or even as an action researcher have an impact or find a leverage point there? And the journey that I took brought me to values-based banks. As you mentioned, banks that use finance actually as a tool for social change. And I deeply believe that innovation and change happens from the margin. That's also what we do at the MIT Community Innovators Lab, trying to find the voices and perspectives from the margin and take that as a departing point for system change. So that was my personal journey. And when we look at this financial sector and why it's overwhelming because the relationship between us as individuals and the system itself is basically upside down. And I want to illustrate that with a quick slide. So if our purpose as humans is to take care of the planet and our society, then the purpose of the economy actually is to provide products and services that we are in need of. So the economy fulfills human needs. And the banking system has a task to facilitate financial actions in this economic system. But what happened is that this system is actually upside down. If you look at the power dynamics, if you look at who takes decisions, the system is upside down. The human and planetary needs are not driving the system. And given that money is actually something that we as humans co-create, so it's not an invention that comes from heaven, it's something that we as humans co-create, we need to find leverage points to change this relationship again.
Wow, yeah. So I think that, particularly that image, kind of basically flipping the order, right, of how you would think about that. That makes a lot of sense, and probably it makes a lot of sense to many of us. But I guess the question we all are sitting with is how, right? So when you really try to do that under the current conditions, is that even possible at all? And how? What have you learned about that?
I think in order to answer the how, we also need to tune a little bit into how did that happen. And I think what's important to understand about money is that money is a number that is an abstraction of our current reality. And this number and abstraction has this tendency to disconnect from the real economy and from who we are as humans. And this abstraction and disconnection creates also an efficiency. So the financial sector is so efficient that we as humans can't really catch up. So one learning is obviously there is a regulatory issue, there's a governance issue, there's a democracy issue. These financial systems are so big that our individual, as I mentioned earlier, individual democracies are no longer capable of really govern the system. So that's one. But coming back to, where is my leverage and how can I as a self relate to this change? So what I've learned is it's possible. And as long as we had finance, money, there were innovations that were capable of anchoring this abstract financial system to our human needs. And I just wanted to maybe also, in spirit of, yes, it's possible, just show a little bit the history of that. So all of you, wherever you are in the world, probably have experience with financial institutions that were founded to help individuals. So to put banking back on the bottom of this pyramid, self-help lending circles, credit unions, community banks. So there, also in our cultures, there were always religious restrictions on finance. So this attempt to reconnect finance to who we are as society, they've always been there and they've been successful. But the other side of innovating this very efficient abstraction of money was always racing ahead. So, but what we see in this century is that there are also movements and there is a waking up to the fact that we as humans co-created a system that we are struggling to continue to control. So a first important step was the social responsible investment movement in the 70s, 80s. And one of their biggest success was the impact they had in supporting the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa through divestment activities. Then in the 90s, most of you are probably also very familiar with this, the triple bottom line approach came up, which basically gave us a new language. How do I balance my profit purpose with planet and people? And in 2004, the UN also added another layer by introducing governance principle that most of you might have heard under the ESG terminology. And we don't have the time to go into all these details, but what's currently really happening is that the impact investment movement is really taking off, which was originally launched by the philanthropic sector. So just to bring this into the space that on a societal level, something is happening and these innovations are becoming more and more successful. And just one brief note on these innovations, and I'm so excited that Mercedes Bidar is in this session today, and we will shift over to a conversation with her as someone who's actually innovating the financial sector in a minute. So what's really important for these, some of you might actually come from financial institutions that are trying to have an impact. What's really important to be aware of is that combining a corporate activity, so a business that's profit focused, with an intention needs an anchoring in the organization. And the anchoring starts on the level of ownership and governance. It continues on the level of structure and processes that need to be reinvented from this perspective of an intention. And it also has to do with the overall culture of the organization, the leadership. So in reinventing a business or a financial institutions from an impact perspective requires innovating how we run a business. And so I just wanted to put this into the circle. And then in terms of the learning, so I think what we really need to be aware of in terms of what we can learn from these innovators is that the society is changing at the moment. I just wanted to point at 4 brief observations that illustrate that. So the first is that our dominant economic paradigm and thinking has a little crack. So this idea that it's all about profit and shareholder value is being questioned on all kinds of levels. So the idea that our economy is neutral, this neutrality paradigm is breaking. And people ask, what happens actually? What happens on the level of planetary and human well-being by this economic activity? So that's a paradigm shift that we can observe actually happening at the moment. And that also affects the financial sector. The second opening that I find personally really interesting is that this monopole around currency is also breaking up. So you all know Bitcoins, cryptocurrencies. Now on national levels, new currency, digital currencies are being experimented with. So this thought, one nation, one currency, is breaking up. And I think that's just an indicator of that this huge shift that we need in finance is beginning to happen. The third shift that probably all of you are very aware of, is the Wall Street fell off its pedestal, and the power of people, the questioning of the financial system is visible everywhere. You know, the way media and people rooted the last 2 weeks for these small investors that were taking down hedge funds when they invested into GameStop. Some of you might have followed that in the US, is an example for that. So the mood about who is right here has shifted. And then the last observation I wanted to share here has to do with another form of money, which is gift money. And in fall of 2020, McKinsey Scott, who owns part of Amazon, gave away over 4 billion to nonprofit organizations. Just to put this in perspective, Gates Foundation gives away 5 billion every year, and have a staff of 1,600 people. So she just gave away unconditionally, in an unconditional way, money. And in her blog about that, she writes the following: "There's no question in mind that anyone's personal wealth is a product of a collective effort and of social structures which presents opportunities to some and obstacles to countless others." So the perspective that she introduced just by her action here is, am I really the one who is responsible for making all this money? So I'm part of a social context. So my individual wealth is part of a collective wealth. And I think this perspective is also coming up here. Thanks.
Very interesting. I think what what you call the cracks and what you described to us is really drawing our attention to that we do live in a bigger moment where something is beginning to open up, and finally we do bring more attention to what money is and what is our agency with co-creating money on the level of the individual and also on the level of the collective. Mm-hmm. I also thought, Katrin, that your first point was really interesting, the anchor. So the 3 anchors that you described, and to me it sounds like the anchor that really
is a very easy step that each of us can do. But in terms, and with that, we also support those innovators that are setting an example for a different model, and that showcase a different model and also develop new techniques here and financial innovations. But lastly, there is a governance issue. We need to develop a governance structure that oversees the system that we co-created. And I think that's beyond of this, beyond what we can discuss in this session. But at the end of the day, the financial sector needs to be under democratic control.
We need to create a new governance system that oversees the financial system. We need to democratize the control of money. Thank you, Katrin. And with that, over to you, Antoinette.
Thank you, Katrin. Yes, what we'd like to do to reflect a little bit is to go through our own personal experience and then connect that up to some of the systemic things that we see. But the way that we'll do that is by journaling. So if you can get a piece of paper and a pen, or something that you can write with, you can just move any of the thoughts that might be percolating onto the paper by using the intelligence of the hands. So you can just keep the pen on the paper, and I will read 3 guiding questions, which will also be in the chat just if you miss the verbal cue. So the first question is, where are you already using money for good? Where are you already using money for good intentionally? I'll just give you a few moments to jot down your thoughts. The second question is, where are you seeing cracks in the current money system? So again, where are you already seeing cracks in the current money system? And Katrin already brought this up, but there are places where we might already see disruption. We might already see some splits in the current reality and a place where something new might be able to come in.
Can't hear anything.
And the last question is actually to give you a moment to just jot down, what questions are you holding? What questions are you holding about money now? And as you jot down some of those thoughts, you can start to type them into the chat. So perhaps, where are you seeing cracks in the current money system? Or what questions are you holding about money now? You can share a comment in the chat box if you're in Zoom, or in the comments if you're on YouTube. And we can read just a few of them out before introducing our guest. So we have a few coming in. Why has money been scary, eliciting fear for some of us? Cracks, I see canyons. Cracks of blockchain currency, ESG investing with BlackRock, GameStop, new US governance team focused on regulation. Questioning GDP as a measure of economy. How to learn when there is enough money, when it is possible to stop wanting more. A question, how to move from only shareholder value as a priority to labor and happiness in organizations as a priority. How to bring more diverse sets of people into the ecosystem of connection in the finance world. So much is who you know, which is fine for some and not for all. How do we address the racial wealth gap in the United States? What does it mean to be a starting entrepreneur in these trembling times? And what does wealth even mean in the bigger picture of life's purpose? Yeah, and with that, there are definitely more coming in and more questions to hold together. But I'll turn it back over to Katrin to introduce our guest, and perhaps we go from there.
Thank you so much, Antoinette. So it's an honor to introduce Mercedes Bidar. Mercedes is originally from Argentina, but right now she is in Colombia and the Pacific Coast. And I met Mercedes here at MIT, where she did her master's of planning. And today, Mercedes is the CEO and co-founder of an innovation that reflects my hope and vision for a future, Kipo. But I would also like to add that for me, Mercedes is also someone who has this amazing capacity to connect her heart to her brain and to act from this place of empathy and love when she innovates in the fintech world. And Mercedes, thank you so much for joining us. So you are the co-founder and CEO of Kipo. What is Kipo? What are you doing and why do we need it?
Hi, Katrin. Hi, all of the GAIA community. I'm very happy of being here. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, as Katrin was saying, I'm now in Barranquilla, the Caribbean coast of Colombia. And what I'm doing is creating Kipo with my team. We are a team of social young entrepreneurs. And Kipo is basically a community marketplace where people can trade without money. And we are focused on implementing Kipo in places where there's a concentration of the informal economy in our cities. And to be a little bit deeper on that, what we saw is that these informal economies that are the 60% of our world economy have a place. They are concentrated in some spaces of our cities that in Latin America we call slums or informal settlements or these type of vulnerable neighborhoods. So we are creating these community marketplaces for places where there's a concentration of vulnerability and lack of money actually in our cities.
And can you describe a little bit maybe the solution that you're experimenting with, but maybe also the journey that brought you to this, to Kipo basically?
Sure, yeah. So well, it's funny that I'm not coming from the financial sector. I never worked in a bank. I'm a political scientist and city planner. So I'm coming with a different perspective to the fintech world, right? And basically my journey started in Argentina, working in informal settlements with women micro-entrepreneurs that they were selling things from their homes in slums, right? So I was helping them with their businesses and actually giving them, really small credit, kind of like Grameen Bank style of microfinance. And so I was doing that on one side. I was going there every Saturday, supporting these business women. And at the same time, I was working in public policy, working with local governments, and I was seeing how there was actually a big gap between the public sector and how they were, designing public policy, and on the other side, what actually these women were living and facing in their everyday lives. So like from that gap is that I started to think, okay, what could we do with technology as something that I saw that everybody in the slums have a smartphone, like they use WhatsApp and Facebook. So, okay, there's technology as an asset, right? There's also a really strong community network as an asset. And there are tons of ideas, but this is completely disconnected from what's going on the public sphere. And that's how I started to be interested in the social entrepreneur world, creating something with my hands and with other people that were like wanting to do something faster maybe, and just creating a tool, for people to develop their own economy. So that's how it started as an idea, as like actually seeing what was going on the ground and like how people have ideas, but they were lacking tools. So we are creating Kipo actually as a tool for micro entrepreneurs to grow their business, but not just their business, but their local economy. So we have a perspective of first focusing on the collective as a way of helping the individual with, financial inclusion and going out of poverty, if you want. So how it works is it's a marketplace that works by proximity. So it's focused, each community has its own marketplace where these entrepreneurs can digitize their offer of products and services, and they can set a value of their products and services that accept in a community currency. So it's basically creating a mutual credit system, but it's blended with pesos. So it's not just a mutual credit system, but it's actually a marketplace with this way of like local transaction, but also with pesos as a way of, fiat currency as a way of exchange. And this actually came out from studying local currencies around the world and seeing how they started, and actually seeing that local currencies start basically when there's an economic crisis. It's when there's like more and more community currencies because there's lack of money. And what we've seen on the ground is that in informal settlements, in slums, there's a scarcity. It's always there. Like there's always a scarcity of money. Like there's never enough money, right? The system never worked there for them. So that's how we said, okay, what if we bring local currencies as a way of exchange that is constant in places that were, and actually they were in a really deep economic crisis before COVID, right? So we are seeing an emergency on top of a pre-existing emergency. That's like, in a nutshell, what we were doing.
So, I mean, in the beginning, we talked about the relationship between self and system. So, I mean, what worked? So you experimented with finding for you personally a leverage, how you can recreate the system. Can you reflect a little bit, what were obstacles, what was pulling you in the right directions, looking back at the journey? Now you have founded Kipo, but it was quite a journey. Maybe you can share a little bit your reflection on this journey from a personal perspective.
Yeah, and it's still a journey, right? It's very difficult to be an entrepreneur, and mostly in this world at this point. So I think it's still, and it will be a long one until it's, something, I don't know. It's quite complicated, but yes, I think it's all about also the people that surround you, like the people that bring you new perspectives. So I think I was seeing a problem on the ground by working directly, with the communities, but I would have never come up with something if I wouldn't have be connected, with you and like with people that are in this area, because I didn't know what it was about, until I said, okay, this problem of the lack of money and the lack of having tools to transact and local commerce, it's not just that problem of the local commerce. This is a bigger problem, and this comes from like a systemic problem. So that was like what actually I ended up like thinking about, but just by being exposed to other people that opened my imagination, if you want. So in a way, I think like where who surrounds you, it's actually something that brings you new ideas, and also a team, right? I think I was like it was not possible for me to start something if I wouldn't have had a team of friends that were just like crazy as I am and idealistic of saying, okay, let's try it out, and now we are actually from different countries, and we are all here in Colombia, and we moved and left our homes to try something out, and also understanding that it's just an experimentation that is constant. And it's a lot of frustration. So I think that having people, doing things together, it's just the answer.
So when you talk about frustrations, so what are the frustrations as a social entrepreneur that you are wrestling with?
Oh, tons. Maybe you think that something is going to work out in a way, and then, you know, you try it out and it's not that way. And it's just like being like open-minded enough to say, okay, this was not a good idea. Like we have to just do it again, you know. So that type of frustration, the frustration of having to change the way also we speak depending on with whom we talk, you know, because trying to find investment money or, you know, trying to find funds for your project, it depends, you know, how open-minded are the people you're talking with, how they will understand actually your goal and your mission. So it's being able to put different hats in different times of the day, and knowing that there's things that will go good, wrong, good, wrong, good. So it's a roller coaster.
So what's the vision that you have?
Yeah.
That's
So
living in
yeah,
you?
our purpose is actually to create and retain wealth locally. So it's not just money, you know, it's wealth. So money, it's getting into these poor places I'm talking about. The thing is that it's going out. How can we can create it and retain it locally? So that's our mission. And also transforming this social capital that it's in these neighborhoods into economic capital, you know. So it's like those two things, I would say.
Can you say more about this transition from a social capital to an economic capital?
Yeah. So when you go, you know, when you go to a slum or an informal settlements, and actually we can maybe put the video that I have there so you can see like one of the neighborhoods where we are working in. You see that there's, you know, tons of people selling things from home. They are having local transactions with one another. If you ask them how, and literally yesterday I was doing a, you know, a survey in one community asking, okay, what's the level of collaboration and trust you have with your neighbors? And you see that it's really high. Like people have tons of collaboration and trust with the ones that are on the same territory. So there's a geography that we share and an identity we have with that neighborhood. So basically, that's the social capital we see, you know. And but they're still living under the poverty line. So there's tons of assets, there's tons of knowledge, you know, there's tons of local relationships, but we are still stuck, you know, and not able to grow our economy. So that's why we mean by saying, let's transform this network, you know, into an economic network that can create wealth. So for example, one of the things that we do is like we say, okay, in the front end, Kipu is a marketplace. In the back end is an ecosystem of granular data of this economy that is not existent today. So as we don't know how our economy works, and you know, how are all those connections, those assets, all the people that are selling something and offering something locally, then we can transform it. So I think that it's basically also, you know, understanding how our economy works, who's there, who's selling what I need, and what is not here, and what we can start producing locally too.
So in a way, you pull back this abstraction and fiction of money, and you really look at the human interaction. And maybe you can share also a little bit what we saw in the video. You know, where were people?
Yeah, so that's our pilot neighborhood. We actually co-designing the platform in that neighborhood. It's a public housing neighborhood called Villas de San Pablo, where 10,000 people live there. And what we've seen is like some images of this public housing, you know, setting, where there are different types of houses. These are people that were relocated from different parts of Colombia because of the armed conflict or because there were some natural hazards where they were living. And by being in this place, what you've seen is that they transform their homes into their business. So that woman that she was cooking in her backyard, you know, and that guy that was in the kitchen, he was making some empanadas also from his kitchen. So you see like all these transformations of the homes that were given to them because it's a public housing neighborhood into a production unit. So that's what we've seen on the video.
So maybe in closing, what can we learn? What can, you know, all of us here in the call learn from your experience in Kipo?
Uy, that's a difficult question. Yeah, well, what I learned so far, maybe that's something that I can share, it's that you just need to be an active listener. There's no way you can create anything, like not just in the financial sector or whatever, you know, if you're not just talking with people, with your community, if you want to transform your community, with another community, if you want to help that community, you know, transform. That's what I learned. Like last year, that it was, you know, COVID, we were in a lockdown, we had to work remotely, and that was extremely difficult, you know, to do something on the ground when you are on a desk. So my learning is just being out there, being an active listener and talking with people. And that's how actually prototypes come up and new ideas and new pilots can come up. That's my learning so far.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing and for innovating something that we can really all learn from. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for having joined us here. Over to you, Antoinette.
Thank you, Katrin.
Thank you, Mercedes, and for just the incredible inspiration of these projects and the work that you're doing there. It's amazing, and it, I'm sure, has inspired so many of us in a variety of different ways. So what we'd like to do is really turn to each other and have small group discussions where we can dive more deeply into what's been activated for us now. So as we turn to each other, taking what we heard and maybe what we journaled, I'll give us the question of what is activated for us now around money. And as we turn to each other, really just applying this sense of deep listening for what's possible, and really sitting with what has been activated for us in this conversation. So what is activated in me now around money? We'll have about 15 minutes for our time together in breakouts, and we'll see you again in the large room after that. Enjoy your time together. Welcome back, everybody. I believe we are just about all here from our breakouts, and it would be wonderful to hear from all of us in some way. So you can type directly in the chat by clicking the chat button at the bottom and typing in what's activated for you based on your conversations that you just had or in general. And then you could also raise your hand. So we'll do a virtual raise hand by clicking on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on raise hand and we'll be able to bring your voice and video across the session. I'll read this one from the chat. And Joy just said, the true value of people cannot be expressed in money. Sounds like you had an interesting breakout session. And we've got Andre coming in. We have multiple Zoom rooms, so we're threading them together and getting Andre in and across. There you go.
We had a very interesting conversation, the three of us, me, Paola from Italy, and Ramonde from South Africa. We were discussing local currencies and community markets as a way to help facilitate transactions and exchanges. And Paola made a very interesting contribution that maybe even local currencies and community markets are still markets, and maybe there are other ways of creating value and making exchanges. Maybe markets still rely on scarcity, on zero-sum games, and maybe there's an economy there is a positive sum that relies on abundance. We can create value continuously. That made me think, I think it's very food for thought. I mean, very interesting.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and where you're going with it. I'm just pulling in some of the chat voices. What's activated for me by my breakout new friends is how I separate the need for security from money and recognize money is just an illusion anyway. The form it takes is constantly evolving in the digital era. And another from Jackie about the inner work is about understanding what is enough for me personally. What is my personal relationship and mission regarding money? So thank you. It looks like we have a Daniel coming in next.
Hey, can you hear me? Okay. I was thinking a lot about the idea of money just being a tool, and it's not really meaning anything if we don't really realize that what it actually does is creates us the safety, the promise of future, of a future of safety in the future, of well-being in the future. But we will not have a future if we don't think in terms of how to use the planet's resources in such a way that if we take 20, we give back 40, and we make that as a priority for every for-profit that is using the planet's resources to, yes, to give back more than what they're taking. Otherwise, we will not have resources in the future. And what's the point of having money when we don't have time, when we don't have a place to live, when we don't have a planet? And we created even crypto, which is really good in essence, but it's an abstraction of an abstraction of money, which is in itself an abstraction. And to mine it, we have to use the planet resources, and doesn't really even exist. So we are so silly that we create something that doesn't exist, and to create it, we have to use the planet's resources in exchange. We need to think a bit more cleverly, intelligently, if we want to have a planet in the future. So that was my thinking that came out of this talk. Thank you so much, all of you. We need a new planet, and you will make that planet, each one of us. It's not the government, it's each one of us who will make the new Earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It looks like we have one final one, Jan, coming in.
Hi, Antoinette. This is Jan. Good to see you. We had a great conversation with Eric, and I think what has activated me most is the social context for wealth. You know, I've been working with entrepreneurs and in connection with wealth and how does it relate to money and so forth, but it's always taken in isolation. A little bit like a shift from ego to eco is required here, because you know, there are no self-made millionaires, there are no self-made billionaires, which is always dependent on the economy and the social system which is in place. And I think this got me really thinking. You know, I've been resisting this idea or avoiding it for the past couple of years. And there's so many books, wonderful books written about this, but it's not about the book, it's about the paradigm. And this is what I got really present to, because everything else is just a mechanism or tool. But if the paradigm doesn't shift, we are going to use new tools with the same, you know, with the same paradigm. So nothing will shift. So thank you for stimulating that conversation. And I really appreciate that space.
Thank you, Jan. I think we do have one more actually in the second Zoom room, so we'll hear from them as well. Viviana.
Yes, thank you. A little bit adding to what the last two people said, it's this idea of, at the moment, we use money, whether as local currency or not, as a form of exchanging, I guess, products and services, basically looking at consumption and production. And I think it would be beneficial to have that paradigm shift of production, of the human beings as beings of production and consumption only. And to add to that, we're not even including non-human beings in the valuation of whatever type of money we're using. So I think there does need to be a paradigm shift, not only using different tools or maybe some that may be less harmful, because ultimately we're still becoming beings of production and consumption and not including non-human beings in our markets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Viviana. Thank you, everyone, for all of the different components of this conversation, and also just what Diana shared in the chat here. The best part about being in this community is the feeling that we are not alone, and that sooner or later a new and better system will emerge. So we are not alone in co-creating that. So to land in the closing of this, we'd like to offer the resonance practice on Olaf's image. And so Olaf, I turn it over to you just in case you have any comments before our practice.
Thank you, Antoinette. There's mainly one thing, because after the last session, somehow the focus went on what can I do? And during this session, suddenly, I don't know why exactly, but when Mercedes were talking about the people that surround you or surround us, that they are actually the key that somehow stood out for me very much, and that came in the end. So it's still what can I do, but it's there somewhere. It's a connection, and it's not just oneself. Yeah. That's all.
Thank you, Olaf. Quite powerful, this image as a whole and your words as well. So thank you. What we'd like to do is you can make your screen full screen. You can, if you're in Zoom, you can click on view full screen. And when you do that, you can really get the full sense of the image. And we'd like to enter into that space together and just take a moment in silence to really be with this image and just notice what we're seeing, sensing, and feeling as we sit together looking at this image. And now, if you'd like to put your thoughts in the chat, you can use the prompts, I see, I sense, or I feel. Just type in what's coming up for you. I see, I sense, I feel. I see light coming out of darkness. I sense treasures of generosity are being revealed. I see we and the importance of listening. I see cohesion beyond the chaos, and I feel lightness coming into the dark of fear. I feel energy. Money is energy. I see money is not neutral, and therefore I want to stay conscious. I see the crack. I feel the need for clarity. I see part of the new model. I sense better values. I feel change. I see some clarity. I feel red is powerful. I see octopus arms embracing re-democratize. I feel hope and trust in the collective.
I see active listening seeding opportunity. I feel thoughtful. I feel alone. I feel we are co-creating money, whether we want it or not, positive or not, abundant or not. I feel humans are stronger than money. I see awakening center of deep connection. I see both courage and trepidation. A better way is before us.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in this resonance process. I'd like to pass back over to Otto to have some final words before we close.
So I also felt the energy. I liked the octopus, and I saw it once it was described around the democratization. And just 2-3 lines I wrote down while listening to the conversation, particularly the latter part of the conversation, in reflecting on the whole sessions. Rethinking money means rethinking our economy and rethinking our relationships that we have to the planet, to each other, and to ourselves. And to ourselves means what Jan talked about, really the shift from ego to eco. And that it is about a paradigm. And if the paradigm doesn't shift, we'll do just more of the same. That's what I heard. There's nothing to be added.
Thank you for that reflection, Otto. So as we close our time together here today, we also open our journey of the next few months. And it's an incredible opportunity to be able to dive into this with you all. So we have a few ways that you can continue on with the journey. And one is that first and foremost, a big thank you to Mercedes and to Katrin for hosting this inspiring story and for sharing it with us. And for more of the deep dive into some of Katrin's work around Just Money, there will be a MOOC starting again on March 15th. So a massive open online course on Just Money. And I believe that the link just went into the chat. Thank you to the hosts for that. So if you'd like to join in on that, it starts March 15th. And you can really go deeper on this particular acupuncture point. We also will have ways for you to stay connected. And as Otto shared earlier, in this prototype that we have of the MicroMasters, is that you can practice in your own community and then share that with others. So there are a few different ways to do that. One is a social solidarity circle, and the other is on Sutra. And Sutra is really a place to continue this dialogue. And there were so many active voices in the chat and in this conversation that we can continue the conversation in a large group in the Sutra space. So if you go to GAIAjourney.org, you can continue to build the momentum around that. There are 2 links there. One is if you haven't built a social solidarity circle yet, that's a place where you can reflect with a small group of people, 4 or 5-ish people you can connect with either in your region or across. If you've already been part of a community working on some of these practices with ULab or otherwise, you may already have a circle. You may have a circle from 2020 GAIA Journey. But now that we're here in this space, you can connect with each other and participate at GAIAjourney.org. We'll be sharing these resources out via email and also on the website. So please feel free to go there. And we'll also share micro practices throughout the journey. And some of them might get more complex over time. But the one that we're going to leave you with today is the idea of paying it forward. And a few people brought up the gift economy and different bodies of work around that. But the idea is that maybe you're going for a coffee or a meal and you want to, or something else, and you want to pay it forward. So you pay for your own and you pay for the person who's coming after you. And the idea is not just to do the act, but also to pay attention to what that activates in ourselves. So what it activates in you and what it activates in the person that you did that for. So just paying it forward and paying attention to what has come up. That is the micro practice for the month. And in that vein, I'd like to also say a big thank you, first of all, to the team who makes this GAIA Journey possible, and also to all of you who have supported the GAIA Journey, either through direct donations and financial contributions to the Presencing Institute, which is a nonprofit organization, and to all of the people who've been volunteering their time and putting things together in their own communities and activating their own communities to join into the conversation so that we can have this global sense-making experience. So if you'd like to continue to be a part of it, you can go to GaiaJourney.org. You can take part in any of the practices I mentioned. You can donate there. You can stay in touch with each other and continue to move forward together. So we'll come back together on March 4th for Social Presencing Theater, an exploration of the social arts. And if you are another language speaker or in another region, I mentioned some of those dates earlier: Portuguese on February 10th, Spanish and German on February 11th, and French on the 15th of February. So enjoy all the ways that we can stay connected, and we'll see you again soon. We can all unmute and say goodbye. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Barbara. My
Yeah,
bye,
Anne.
Bye.
Bye, dear.
everyone.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Be well and thrive.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mm.